At 20 years old, Henri Matisse was completely trapped. He was stuck in a bed in northern France, recovering from a bout of appendicitis, with a rigid life path already mapped out for him: finish law school and take over the family grain business. Looking for a way to help him pass the time, his mother brought him a small box of paints. It was intended strictly as a distraction for a recovering patient, but the moment Matisse started mixing the colors, he felt a sensation he had never experienced before: absolute freedom. He immediately abandoned his legal studies and moved to Paris to enroll in art school. His father, who expected him to take over the family trade, refused to ever forgive him. Matisse had found the one thing that mattered. He would spend the next 60 years pursuing the feeling of total liberation he first discovered in that hospital room. While studying in Paris, Matisse made a massive financial gamble. He spent more money than he could afford to buy a small painting by Paul Cézanne. He would keep it near him for the next 37 years. Studying that canvas, Matisse absorbed what he called the architecture of painting. He saw exactly how color and structure could physically support each other to organize a composition. Cézanne became the foundation everything else was built upon. In the summer of 1905, he took that structural foundation to the Mediterranean coast. Painting alongside his friend André Derain, Matisse pushed these boundaries to extreme limits. Together, they reached a radical conclusion. Color did not have to accurately describe physical reality. A tree didn't have to be green. Color could be deployed as a pure emotional force on its own. That autumn, they submitted their new work to the Salon d'Automne in Paris. The organizers intentionally gathered their glaringly bright canvases into a single room, hanging them in a circle around a highly conventional, traditional bronze sculpture. A prominent art critic walked into the room, saw the classical statue surrounded by these violent bursts of color, and wrote that it looked like Donatello in a cage of wild beasts, or in French, fauves. The insult stuck. Fauvism lasted barely 3 years, but by proving that a painting's color could exist entirely independent of the physical world, it broke the requirement that art must imitate nature. By 1917, World War I had been grinding across Europe for 3 devastating years. Matisse, now 47, desperately wanted light. He settled on the sun-drenched coastline of Nice. For the next 2 decades, his work evolved inside the bright rooms of the French Riviera. He painted domestic spaces saturated with Mediterranean clarity, women resting, vivid patterned fabrics, and tall windows thrown open to lush gardens. The artistic establishment heavily criticized the shift. Reviewers repeatedly dismissed these vibrant interiors as merely decorative, lacking the serious weight expected of a major artist. Matisse completely rejected the premise that decoration was an insult. He argued openly that the purpose of art was precisely to give pleasure and rest, to offer the mind the same comfort that a good armchair provides an exhausted worker. Through sheer persistence, he decoupled his art from the expectation that serious genius required grim realism or visible suffering. But in his late 60s, Matisse faced the ultimate threat to his independence. A severe surgery left him largely bedridden, destroying his physical ability to stand at a canvas. Instead of retiring, he bypassed his failing body entirely. He invented an entirely new medium, a technique he called painting with scissors. He had his studio assistants pre-paint large sheets of paper with vivid, opaque gouache. Confined to a bed or a wheelchair, he methodically sliced the paper into sprawling flowers, figures, and abstract leaves, directing his team to pin the compositions directly onto his studio walls. The cutouts reached their peak in his 1947 book, Jazz. By arranging simplified, vivid shapes into tight compositions, Matisse created a new visual grammar that graphic designers would use to organize pages and posters for the next 50 years. At 81 years old, he orchestrated his final masterwork. He designed every single element of the Chapelle du Rosaire in Vence, from the architectural layout and priest's vestments down to the brilliant stained glass windows towering over him. He worked until the week he died in 1954, outliving 2 world wars, his harshest critics, and most of his contemporaries. Upon his death, Pablo Picasso declared that Matisse was the only painter alive who could hold color and form in the exact same thought. He began his adult life as a trapped patient in a sickbed. 60 years later, when his body ultimately failed him again, his artistic freedom was so deeply ingrained that he simply grabbed a pair of scissors and cut a joyful new path forward.